I always thought I lived on a perfectly safe street. You know, the kind of place where kids ride bikes until the streetlights come on, and everyone gives a little wave. I really thought I knew my neighbors. I was wrong. The person who lived right next door, just a few feet from where I sleep, vanished. This is the story of the day the silence on my street became deafening, and the questions that have haunted me ever since. My street looks like a postcard from suburbia. Neat two-story houses, mailboxes that match, lawns that are maybe a little too green. For 7 years, the house on my left belonged to a man named Mr. Henderson. He was the kind of neighbor you know by his schedule, not by his name. A quiet guy in beige pants who just existed on the edge of my daily life. He had to be in his late 60s, kept to himself, and lived his life by a timetable you could set your watch by. Every single morning at 7 a.m., he'd be out there, retrieving his newspaper. Every Tuesday at 6 p.m., he'd roll his recycling bin to the curb. Every Saturday, he'd mow his lawn in those perfectly straight, overlapping lines. The man never had visitors. Never threw a party. Never even left a Christmas light up a day too long. He was just there. A constant, predictable part of the background noise that made our world feel safe and orderly. Until one day he wasn't. Before we get into what happened next, do me a favor and subscribe to the channel. I share stories about the mysteries that are hiding just under the surface of our everyday lives. If you've ever had an experience that you just can't shake, you're in the right place. Okay, let's get back to it. The first clue that something was off was so small I almost talked myself out of it. It was a Wednesday morning. I'm heading out for work, and I see Mr. Henderson's trash can is still at the curb. Trash day was Tuesday. For 7 years, that can was back by the side of his house by Tuesday. Seeing it sitting there on Wednesday, it just felt loud. Like a wrong note in a song you've heard 1,000 times. I remember just standing in my driveway for a second, staring at that plastic bin. I tried to explain it away. Maybe he was sick. Maybe he finally went on a trip. But he never went on trips. In 7 years, the man's car, an old spotless sedan, had never been gone overnight. I glanced at his driveway, and there it was, parked in its usual spot. I told myself I was being ridiculous. It's just a trash can. People forget. But this little splinter of unease had gotten under my skin, and I couldn't dig it out. That evening, I looked over at his house. All the lights were off. Complete darkness. That was weird too. He always had a lamp on in the living room, this soft yellow glow that would stay on until about 10 p.m. But that night, there was just nothing. A few more days went by. The trash can was still out there, like some lonely little guard. The Thursday newspaper landed at the end of the driveway, joining the one from Wednesday. Then Friday's paper came. By Saturday morning, there was this sad little pile of unread news. The headlines about city council meetings turning into a soggy pulp from the dew. His car hadn't moved an inch. The silence from the house was different now. It wasn't just quiet. It was an active, heavy kind of emptiness. I didn't hear the faint murmur of his TV anymore, or the sound of his back door sliding open in the morning. The house, which had always been this quiet but living thing, was totally still. It felt like it was holding its breath. I started trying to talk to other neighbors. Hey, have you seen Mr. Henderson? I'd ask, trying to sound casual, like I wasn't some nosy busybody. Most people hadn't even noticed anything. They'd just offer a vague, "Oh, I'm sure he's fine," and get back to their gardening. It was a bizarre feeling, realizing that someone could be such a part of our daily routine, but so absent that their disappearance went completely unnoticed. The turning point for me, the moment that little knot of anxiety in my stomach tightened into real fear, was on Sunday night. I was taking my own trash out when I saw it. A single light flickered on in his upstairs window. The bedroom. It was a quick, frantic flash, on and off like a faulty switch. And then it was gone. The house was plunged back into that tomb-like darkness. It wasn't the steady, warm light I was used to. It was something else. It felt frantic. That flickering light was all it took. That image, plus the newspapers and the silence. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The next morning, Monday, a full week after I first saw the trash can, I called the police and asked them to do a wellness check. I watched from my kitchen window as the patrol car pulled up. 2 officers got out, looking so calm and professional, which was the complete opposite of how I was feeling. They knocked on the front door. They waited. They knocked again, louder this time, calling out his name. The only answer they got was the sound of birds on his perfect lawn. They started walking the perimeter, peering into windows. They checked the back door. Finally, after a long conversation over their radio, one of the officers got a tool and forced the front door open. From where I was standing, I couldn't see inside, but I saw them step over the threshold and disappear into the dark house. It felt like forever, but it was probably only 15 minutes before they came back out. They didn't rush. They didn't look panicked. But their faces were grim. A few minutes later, another car, this one unmarked, pulled up. And then came the yellow tape. They stretched it from the corner of his house to the big oak tree on his lawn, a sterile, official line that sliced right through the heart of our quiet little street. The neighborhood was awake now. People who hadn't given Mr. Henderson a second thought were suddenly out on their lawns, whispering, their faces a mix of fear and morbid curiosity. The police weren't talking. "We're conducting an investigation," was all they'd say. But bits and pieces started to trickle out through the neighborhood grapevine. Someone heard an officer say that the house was completely empty. Not just empty of people, but eerily normal. A full pot of coffee, cold and stale, was left on the machine. His wallet and keys were on the kitchen counter. His bed was made. It was as if he'd just been scooped out of the middle of his morning routine and evaporated. There was no sign of a struggle, no note and no body. Nothing. The yellow tape stayed up for 3 days. Forensic teams went in and out. I saw them carry out a few small evidence bags, but they looked almost empty. As far as any of us could tell, the investigation turned up nothing. When the tape finally came down, the house just sat there, quiet again. Only now the silence felt different. It wasn't just a quiet house. It was a memorial to an unanswered question. The police eventually wrapped up their on-site investigation. The official story was simple. A man was missing. There was no evidence of foul play, but they couldn't rule it out. It was a non-answer that satisfied no one, and left everything hanging in this permanent state of maybe. Months passed. The lawn that Mr. Henderson had cared for so perfectly grew long and wild. Weeds took over the flower beds. Then a for sale sign appeared, put there by a distant relative none of us ever knew existed. The house was sold to a young, happy-looking family who didn't know the story. They painted the front door a bright red, and soon the sound of kids laughing filled the yard where there had only been silence. But for me, the silence never really left. I still look at that house and see the yellow tape. I still think about that flickering light in the upstairs window. The questions just sort of moved in and became a permanent part of my life. What happened to the quiet man next door? How can a person with a routine, a home, and a life just disappear? Where did he go? It's been years, and nothing new has ever come out. Mr. Henderson is a ghost now, a local legend the older neighbors whisper about. His disappearance became a story we tell ourselves to remember that the world isn't nearly as safe and predictable as it looks from a suburban street. And the most chilling part isn't the idea that something awful happened to him. The most chilling part is not knowing. It's the silence that came after, and the terrifying, haunting question that's still there. How can someone just vanish into thin air? Have you ever experienced something you just couldn't explain? A mystery in your own neighborhood that left you with more questions than answers? Share your story in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you want to hear more stories about the unsettling side of our familiar world, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's next. Thanks for watching.